Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is finally contacting me after almost 10 years. I grew up in what was probably the most normal of normal households. Parents worked a lot, but still managed to care for me and my 3 older sisters. We were never super close as a family, but never had any issues either. Same goes for my extended family. They always lived a few hours away, but we saw each other during summer holidays or Christmas and always got along great. But when we got older we naturally grew apart as everyone had their own lives. I'm 31 now. In 2014, when I was 22 and attending uni, I got a phone call from my mother that turned my life upside down. I remember I didn't even answer at first, because I was gaming with friends. But she called again immediately after the first call. This was an unwritten rule in the family. If you call twice like that, it's important. Like someone died important. So when she called again, I excused myself and answered, only to hear chaos in the other end. Like people were arguing. But when my mom realized I had answered, it sounded like she went to another room and closed the door. I just asked what was going on and I heard she was crying. My memory of this conversation is a bit blurry, but she basically asked me if I had something to confess to regarding E. E is my cousin on my mom's side and is 7 years younger than me, 15 at the time. At that point I hadn't even seen E for several years. I just said no and asked what this is about. She just cried even harder and started accusing me of SA-ing E back when we were children. That E had told everything to my sister, and that my sister told my mother and my aunt. E had told them that back when she was 9, and I 16, she'd been playing in my room when I came in and started feeling her under her clothes and kissing her. My mother screamed at me to say something, but I couldn't even speak. It was all so absurd. I remember thinking that must be some bad joke. The last thing I remember saying was that it's not true and that E is lying. But then my mom goes on saying that how E gave such a detailed description of where and how. Then she kept asking something like, "Did you do this? Did you do this?" And I just screamed back at her no. Each time. It all ended with my mom putting me on speaker and both my mom and dad saying that they don't want anything to do with me and never to contact them again. 2 of my sisters texted me later that day, pretty much saying that I'm disgusting and then blocked me. I know it's weird, but after that call I went to have a long shower. To this day I still don't know why I did that. After calming down, I started calling and texting everyone, even E. No one answered and the ones who hadn't blocked my number by then quickly did so. The only thing I heard back was from my father who texted me to stop contacting them and that they need to heal. That was 9 years ago and I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that day. To say this fucked me up is an understatement. I was living in a haze for weeks after that and hardly ate at all. It didn't help that this was right before I was supposed to defend my bachelor's thesis and was already stressed out. Luckily my co-writer sensed something was up and saved me by controlling the conversation so that I got the easy parts. Without him I sure I would have failed. Needless to say, no one came to my graduation. Then started the worst period of my life. I spent the first year expecting the cops to knock on my door and arresting me for sexual abuse. I didn't land any jobs, just living off my saved money. I drank a lot and did oxy. I also grew resentful and violent. The only reason I didn't hurt anyone is because no one was around. My neighbor called the cops on me once after I had smashed a glass, but I managed to convince the officers that I had just dropped it, and they went away since there were no others inside my apartment. Instead of sleeping, I spent my nights planning how I could hurt E and make sure no one ever found out. Even thinking how I could actually do the things she'd accused me of, but much worse. I know, I'm not proud of that. I landed my first real job in my field in late 2015. Only then did things start to improve. I focused all my time on my job, as it gave me something normal to do. Recovery was a slow process, but I drank less and smiled more. I lived cheap and earned good money, so I made a point of buying myself a nice gift for my birthdays, a VR headset, a motorcycle, Lego etc. And last year I moved from my shitty apartment and bought a small house. It was an old dream of mine to have my own garage and a garden to care for. This has boosted me even more. So my life is okay now. I still got problems. I've been on antidepressants for the last few years and while they help, it's not in a happy way. They simply remove the dark thoughts and replace them with dead ones. My trust in other people is close to non-existent. I've tried dating, but only been on 2 dates with 2 different women. It's really hard to speak like a normal person when it comes down to it. And what would I tell a potential partner when she asked about my family? Oh, you know they accused me of a heinous crime and we're not talking anymore. But I didn't do it, I swear. My field is very male-dominated, so the only woman I really speak to is my therapist, who I like a lot. A few days ago, I received a text from my mother. It felt unreal and I was scared to open it at first, so I just stared at the notification for hours before opening it. Yesterday, a second text followed. Translated, they basically say, "Hi, my name, it's been so long since we talked. We miss you and want to know how you're doing." Here she writes a long text about my sisters and how my nieces and nephews are getting big. I didn't even know I was an uncle. Know that we love you and always will. Love, Mom and Dad. The second text said, "Hi, my name, we understand if you don't want to talk to us after what happened, but please listen. Last month, the subject of you was brought up at a family gathering. During this, E was downplaying everything that had happened to her. It got so awkward that she finally admitted that nothing happened and that she probably just dreamt it. We were all appalled by this. When we last spoke, we wanted to protect E and did the only thing we thought we could do. We know that's not excusing how you were treated. What E did was wrong and we're all angry at her. We have called everyone that knew and told them the truth. We all want to speak with you and your sisters want you to meet their families. Please write back if you can find it in you to forgive us. Love, Mom and Dad." So yeah. That's my situation right now. I haven't answered, but they no doubt know I've seen it. Truth be told, I'm seething. So many old, shitty memories are now stirring again. I don't want to forgive them and I wouldn't trust myself to be in the same room as them right now. Part of me wants to call my family and unleash everything on them, to guilt them with everything I went through until they all hit their rock bottom. Then dedicate my life to make my cousin's life as miserable as possible. The other part wants to ignore them and continue with my okayish life with my motorcycle and my garden to keep me company. I don't have any friends. The only people I speak to are my coworkers, but we're not really close. I've called my therapist's clinic, but they told me she's on vacation and won't be available for weeks, and I don't want anyone else than her. So that leaves internet strangers. So please, where to go from here? Do I ignore them and continue as is? Or do I answer? And if so, what to even write? I'm pretty sure meeting them in person would be a bad idea for a foreseeable future, but I'm not even sure how my life can improve from picking up those old threads. As embarrassing as it may sound, I've dreamed about the day when they apologize to be them throwing themselves to the ground and kissing my feet. Texting seems so anticlimactic now. Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is contacting me after almost 10 years part 2. So it's been around 3 months since I last posted the previous post and a decent amount has happened. Some for the better and some for the worse. For one, E is still a huge a-hole. Around a week after my family sent me the messages, she also reached out with a huge apology text. When I received it, I couldn't believe my eyes. She was talking about how she had mental problems and has been dealing with them for ages, almost as an excuse as to why she did this to me. She said she needed help and her parents were helping her get it. This seemed like BS to me because all my life I knew E. She was a beaming, radiant girl, until that dreadful day in 2014. The whole text felt like she was just feeding me excuses to why it happened, and then ending it off with the shortest actual apology. My original plan was to go on with my life and try to slowly make it better and better, but seeing this pushed me to my limit. I had to respond, and tear into her with the most vile words I could think of. In the end, the actual text I ended up sending said, "You think your mental problems are bad? Try being torn away and excommunicated from your whole family for 10 years when you were just in the infant years of your adult life, and see how bad those mental problems become. I am still trying to deal with all of this and the last thing I need is the culprit of my misery feeding me excuses as to why it happened. My other relatives may have been in the dark the whole time, but you knew the entire time, and it never dawned on you to say things sooner? You're lucky I didn't unalive myself at this point. My parents and sibling might be another story, but I will never be able to forgive you for the irreversible damage you have done to me and my relationships. Please, rot in hell and never contact me again." She hasn't responded, but I can see that she got the message because of read receipts. Maybe she took the hint to not respond. The good news is that I also responded to my parents. Nothing crazy in text because we really got the whole conversation out over the phone. It felt weird hearing their voices again. I used to relate those voices to being safe and home, but after what happened it was a whole new feeling. At first, I hated it. All the sour memories popped back into my brain from the day I last spoke to them. Those voices had been screaming at me for things I didn't even do. The conversation lasted about 3 to 4 hours, and while it was hard for me and most likely them, it was the most productive conversation I've ever had with them. I thought it would be a lot of excuses just like E, but to my surprise, they not only apologized a million times over, but told me everything they were in the wrong about. They said it was weighing on them all these years and now that the truth is out they don't know how they can live with themselves. The one really hard part was when I asked them why they didn't hear me out or believe their own son compared to a niece. They told me they struggled with it immensely but E had made it so believable that they felt they had no choice. I told them that instead of just cutting contact, they should have at least tried to get me help, but they gave me nothing to work with. They said they knew this and that was the hardest part. After the first year or two, they said they wanted to contact me and try to figure things out, but they ultimately decided that me being who I was would not talk to them and things would just get worse. That got me heated a little bit because who cares what type of person I am? What I really am is your son and that comes first. At the end we came to the conclusion that we will stay in contact. I am not going over to visit them or anything but it's a start. While there is still so much hatred in my heart for them, I feel like things can get better, and that's why I'm somewhat happy. Since that phone call, we frequently check up on each other, and conversations are slowly getting back to what they used to be. Maybe I'll visit them someday, but I don't know when that will be or how it will go. How am I supposed to hug and say hi to the people who threw me out of their life? Cousin falsely accused me of SA. Now my family is contacting me after almost 10 years. Final part. Hey guys, so I have another update on my whole situation regarding E and the SA. It has been another 4 to 5 months since the last update and I have some better news than worse this time again. To start off, a lot of people were telling me to sue or take E to court. While I agree that what she did was unforgivable and heinous, I don't feel like that will cause any good. The situation has been 10 years in the making and I kind of just want to be all over and done with it. Taking her to court would cost me thousands in legal fees that I just can't afford, and I also can't help but think of the fact that E never took it to court either. I know that's not a good excuse but it's just a thought. I am still in contact with my parents and you won't believe it but I actually visited them around a week ago. They also have removed contact with E, and I feel like her getting the same treatment I went through is similar to being sued in terms of punishment. Believe me I would know. Visiting the parents went well. I haven't seen the rest of my family as I want the process to be gradual, but we met and had a nice dinner, of course. In my last post I said I didn't know how the greeting process would go. How was I supposed to greet the people who tore my normal life away? Well, the greeting went better than I imagined. I thought hate would win over me but I actually felt somewhat relieved when I saw them. Is that weird? Maybe it was the fact that seeing them meant maybe my life was getting back to the normal it was before, but I don't know. I didn't hug them until after because the conversation we had was pretty grueling. I didn't mean to rip into them but I felt I had to really get the point across of how much hurt they had caused me. At some point my mother cried, because of the detail I went into about my darkest times. They said they know they can't do anything to fix what has happened but want the future to be optimistic. They even opened the idea of coming home for Christmas and seeing the rest of the family, but I told them my plan about taking it slow and said I might be open to the idea. While I am still conflicted, that feeling of hatred is slowly going away and I am overall just feeling like a better person in general. I think the weight of the situation had pulled me down all those 10 years and now that I am free of judgment it feels good. I have also started dating now, and met a great girl that I am starting to slowly get serious with. Life is getting better. Who knows what will happen in the next 10 years after this, but for the first time in ages I feel like things are going up. For all those reading, please use my story as an aid to your personal problems and grudges. Things do get better, even if you have to wait 10 years. I don't love my disabled wife, and I resent that I slept with my girlfriend's mom 2 years ago. I can't tell her because it will end her parents' marriage. So let me first just say, I'm not the one in the wrong for this, but I have to say it somewhere. It's eating me alive. 2 years ago when I was 19 I met this woman while I was working as a personal trainer. She was in her 40s and looked like a 25-year-old. She took an interest in me and invited me out a number of times and we had sex a few times. After one of our meetups she said it was wrong for someone of her age to be with me because I was too young and changed gyms. My girlfriend and I have been together for just under a year. She's amazing and I love her so much. 2 months ago I met her family for the first time and it was a shock. Like she took me to the house where I had hooked up with a woman and I felt like I was being pranked. When I saw those distinct features of the house, I knew my life was in for a roller coaster. Before I see her mom it hits me. I have a type and they both fit that type so it makes sense. I've been hooking up with a single mom and I'm now with her daughter. Then her mom and dad pop out and we both almost shit ourselves. I meet her parents, they've been married for 20 years. I realize I have been a married woman's boy toy. I feel incredibly ashamed. Later that week her mom finds my number and tells me that I can never speak of what happened. She says that my girlfriend will hate me forever because I'll be the one who broke up her parents. So now I'm stuck keeping this secret. She invited me to spend Thanksgiving and with her family, and since my family is 1,000 miles away and I already told her I don't plan on going home, I don't really have an excuse to not go. So now I'm going to have to sit there at a table and enjoy Thanksgiving dinner with the woman I had an affair with, her husband, and her daughter whom I am now in love with. I'm fucked, and I have no clue how to get out of this. Is it almost worse that I find the mom more attractive? Husband said his friends cheated on their wives during group trip. Did he also cheat? Like the title says. My husband went on a trip with a group of men. Many of these are friends of a mutual friend on the trip. He knew 3 of the guys beforehand and met the rest on the trip. They went to a place known for sex tourism. Well, it's about halfway into the trip and my husband FaceTimes me telling me all the dirty and grotesque things happening on it. The problem is that he didn't seem uncomfortable. He told me almost like it was no big deal, when in reality it definitely is a big deal. Most of the men are married with kids and one has a long-term girlfriend. Of the group of men, my husband said he and one other guy were the only ones who didn't take up the offer of hookers from their tour and security guy. That term is used loosely as he was also the guy offering them party favors and women. I find it hard to believe that out of everything going on over there, he and only one other guy didn't partake. I love my husband very much, and I want to trust him, but maybe he was saying this to try and hide anything he did? My husband told me this on the condition that he does not want something to come out later and he will be implicated by association. He felt that I should know what was happening on this trip and he can't risk our relationship. He also said I cannot inform any of the wives and they would know it was him who broke the bro code. That makes me even more suspicious at the fact that he was also doing it. If no one wanted the information getting out, then why would he tell me? The only reason I could think of is to get on my good side if the information came out later. They all seemed so comfortable cheating on their spouses and he said it didn't seem like it was their first time. Someone we know very closely and wouldn't imagine doing something like this also participated, which doesn't help my husband's situation. I am so conflicted and hurt by these people. I will be seeing these wives and girlfriend at events and some of them frequently. How can I not tell them? I feel as a woman, I would want to be informed. However, my husband said it is not our business as to what their marriages are like. He told me that there is no way their wives don't have an inkling, but does he really think I don't have one about him? Before he went to this destination, we looked it up and I mentioned to my husband that because this is what people go there to do, I'm slightly uncomfortable, and his assurance was that he would openly communicate with me and let me know everything that happened. Which he did. I just don't know how to respect these people and continue being friends with them as well as not spilling the beans. If I am cold with them or don't interact with them, they will know something is up as I'm usually bubbly and outgoing. Well, as expected, we go to one of these events where all the wives and girlfriend will be, and the whole time I feel so out of place just because of the information I knew. Then, the girlfriend tells me something that made me really question my husband. She brought up the trip, and said how lovely it was that my husband came up with the idea to go to that location, and how much fun they had. This made my thoughts spiral out of control. Could all these allegations that I made up about my husband in my mind actually be true? Why would he suggest out of all people to go to a place that is known for this type of stuff? It has truly taken over any other thought in my brain. After she said that, I told her I had to excuse myself and just went to the bathroom and sobbed. It is later in the night and I am currently writing this in bed as he falls asleep next to me. How do I confront him about this? I feel as though with me bringing it up, all he would have to do is say the girlfriend is lying, and how am I supposed to refute that? I don't have any evidence against my claims, and he did everything I asked him to do on that trip. Have open communication, and keep in contact, both of which he did, or did he? Live a double life with my wife, and with that. Had sex with my dead twin brother's girlfriend to help cope with his loss. My twin sewer slide was one of the most impactful parts of my life. Being only 14 at the time, it was confusing, heartbreaking, and completely changed my perspective on life. I had never experienced the death of a loved one, so my first death being my brother was extremely tough for me. My parents became increasingly concerned about me and my mental health, so she always filled our flat with people close to my brother to make me feel supported. One of these people was my brother's girlfriend. She lived nearby and had been dating my brother for about a year, so I saw her a decent amount, but in the months after his death she came over almost every day for supper. Like me, she took his death pretty hard. We would comfort each other by talking about our favorite things to do with him, listen to his favorite songs, and would do anything to make it feel like he's still here with us. One night, while doing this exact routine we had for months, we started talking about their relationship. Being young and innocent, I barely understood the concept of a relationship, so when she told me they were sexually active, I was stunned. I started bombarding her with questions, all of which she answered with little detail. After finding this out though, it was hard for me to live knowing there was a side of my brother I never got to see and only she got to see. Over the next year or so, she became more willing to talk about the details that I was dying to know. The more time went on, the more details I got, and the closer me and her became. It being a few years after his death now, she was an open book with me. We discussed her struggles with dating after bro's death and how it's hard for her to even imagine herself being with someone else after what she had been through. One night in late winter we had come home from an outdoor concert. It was the type of cold where you could feel it in your bones. I ran to my room to grab blankets and proceeded to cover ourselves on the couch. She cuddled up towards me as we watched some TV and attempted to warm ourselves up by my tiny electric fireplace. It felt so natural that I had barely even noticed that what we were doing was probably abnormal. As usual, we start discussing her relationship issues and she mentions how cuddling on me felt like she was with him again. She started crying, which made me start to tear up. I embrace her more as she talks about how much she misses his touch. I would also like to note that throughout all this, I did not have sensual feelings towards her whatsoever other than a fleeting thought here and there. At this point though, things started to get somewhat heated, despite me not realizing it at first. She slides her hands under my sweater to embrace me tighter and simply asks, "Can I?" At this point I realized what she's starting to imply and we started kissing. The more we did it, the more passionate it became. We had sex that night and it was the most natural good feeling thing I've ever experienced. This evolved into a full-on relationship that was cut short by me having to leave for uni. However, it seemed that whatever she got from our short-lived relationship helped her get over my brother, as she was in a relationship shortly after I left. She also seemed to be much happier from the few conversations we've had since. Our relationship also helped me cope with his death in a weird way since she was there for me throughout my entire grieving process. It felt like closing a chapter on a tough time in my life. Not sure how immoral it was, but in the end it was largely beneficial to both of us. She cheated on me, so I had a threesome with her former ex-boyfriend and the guy she cheated on me with. To clear up any confusion that might come up, you have to know that I am a bisexual man. I love sharing this story because I'm still proud of it. A few years ago my ex-girlfriend cheated on me with another guy. She then had the audacity to tell me that if I was a grown-up that I could deal with it and that she hopes we can still be friends, but she lost any feelings for me and is fully in love with this new guy now. If she hadn't said that, I probably wouldn't have made this plan. But now I had to teach her a valuable lesson. I was in a depressed state for a long time and couldn't bring myself to delete her number. And she thought I was her friend now. She started to send me pictures of her and her new boyfriend with laughing emojis. She didn't even care about how much she had hurt me. And then one day while I went through Tinder I found someone who was quite familiar. Her new boyfriend. Of course I wouldn't tell her that her new boyfriend is on Tinder. In fact I matched with him, which was quite surprising because I thought he was straight and we started a conversation. He didn't know who I was. She never told him she was in a relationship while she was flirting with him. But this was perfect. We had longer conversations and he told me more and more about him. Over the weeks we learned more and more about each other and now I had a plan. I suggested that we could meet each other at a bar. He agreed. Keep in mind he was still in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend at that time. When we met we had a great time, and one date became many dates. It took me a few months, but then I got him to the point where he developed feelings for me and I was his affair. What he didn't know is that I got in contact with my girlfriend's former ex-boyfriend as well. He broke up with her because he came out as gay. I was in contact with both guys. The ex-boyfriend and I got along very well. In fact I made him a close friend of mine. In our conversations with my new boyfriend we talked about sensual desires and he me told that he always wanted to have a threesome, so I suggested one with the gay ex-boyfriend. I knew that he was his type because we kind of look alike and he had feelings for me, so I asked the gay ex-boyfriend if he wanted to become the third one and to my surprise he said yes. I'm honestly still surprised how all of that worked out without her noticing, but it did, and then the day came where I decided to go nuclear. The two guys came to my apartment, and I lead them to the bedroom and they started talking to each other. While they talked I took a selfie from a safe distance, close enough so that she could see their faces but far enough that they wouldn't notice. Then the action started. Of course I won't go into any detail, but damn I enjoyed it more than anything in the world. A few days after this I told him that now that I granted him the wish of a threesome I wanted something in return. I told him that I don't want to be in an affair any longer and told him that he should either break up with her or I will break up with him. I knew it was hardcore manipulative, but I had a plan and I had full control over him. He actually broke up with her and threw her out. I even got him to move out of his apartment to move in with me, meaning that she lost both her home and her boyfriend. But I wasn't done yet. Because after that she texted me with crying emojis that her boyfriend dumped her and that she regrets leaving me. I then said, "Your boyfriend? Are you talking about this guy?" And I sent her the selfie I took. She called and texted me several times, but I ignored her. My plan was almost successful. There were only 3 things left that I still had to do. The first was that I told her mother, who hates infidelity more than anything because her father cheated on her mother with another woman. Her mother was angry but thanked me for telling her. From what I've heard is that her mother cut ties with her, but I admit that I don't know if that actually happened, and I don't think that it happened, but it would be funny if it was true. The second thing I did was dumping him because unfortunately for him he was a cheater too and I hate infidelity. The last thing I did was going out with a gay ex-boyfriend, and after a few dates we got together and we are still a couple. In the end I destroyed both her and the guy she cheated on me with and couldn't be more proud of myself. My wife is not the woman I used to know. She let the fame get to her. I met my wife when I was 15 in high school, she was 17. That latter part of my teenage years was probably the hardest of my life, since in half a year I lost my mother. Never knew my dad, so she was the only thing I could consider family. At that time, me and my wife were only friends, but she was there for me, and grieved with me. I think I started developing feelings for her during that time. We started dating when I was 17, and we got married 7 years later. For context, my wife was very frugal and unmaterialistic. She never cared about clothes, makeup, brands, cars, always spending money on thrift shops or during sales on whatever she liked. I remember trying to impress her with my 370Z just for her to react with, "What car is this? A Corolla?" So yeah. I think you get the point. But that's what I liked about her the most. And also, she was the most caring person I ever knew. In our family, she's the successful one, always working in big corporations. Regarding myself, I always worked as a community first responder for my local hospital. The salary wasn't high, but I loved my job, helping people as much as I could. Fast forward, 2 years ago she received an offer from an important company for an executive position, offering 4 times her salary that wasn't even bad to begin with, but we would have to move to a different city. At first, I was doubtful, since that would mean losing my job, which meant I could not contribute financially to our family for an indefinite time period, but she said that she could sustain the family effortlessly with this new job, and with that new extra time that I had I could look after the house and groceries until I found a new job. Since she was so enthusiastic, I accepted. I was happy to support my wife's career. Well, the best way I can put it is that my wife underwent a crazy transformation. She started caring more and more about luxury brands, jewels, cars, etc. I don't think you can quite imagine my disbelief seeing her coming back home with a Versace bag after seeing her for years wearing $10 coats from our local thrift shop. She also started hanging out with her new female coworkers a lot. My wife isn't very extroverted or very social, so that was quite the shock, but I was very happy for her. I thought that she finally found her dimension after years of struggling. But that happiness started fading after she started coming home way later every day. And later. And later. Until it was a miracle to be able to talk to her for 10 minutes a day. I thought it was because she was busy with work, since being an executive means lots of work, until she started posting lots of photos of her with her coworkers drinking, going shopping and stuff. The fun part is, she never finds time to reply to my text, but she always has a minute to post photos. And when she replies, she says that she's working. She also literally stops saying things to me altogether. Have you ever experienced your wife or husband going to work with an Audi A3 and then coming back home with a Porsche Macan GTS? Well, I did, and let me tell you. It's no fun. I confronted her on if it was a business-issued car, which it isn't, then on why she spent so much money on a car when she didn't care not even a little about cars. Her passive-aggressive response was that it's her money and that she is entitled to do as she pleases. Or have you experienced not seeing your wife or husband coming back home for a night and not replying to text just to receive a call the following afternoon saying that she forgot to tell me that she left for a business trip? Well, I hope you haven't. But the worst is when she invited me for lunch with her coworkers. I was very happy because that was the first time we were doing something together in months, and I thought that what I've experienced before was only a phase and that it was all over. My wife left first because she had work to do, so I dressed up nicely and left 2 hours after to the scheduled restaurant. For context, I sold years before my 370Z because I didn't need a sports car anymore, so my daily driver is a very frugal Renault Clio. I like it, and since I don't need that much, I don't have reasons to upgrade to a pricier model or brand. Well, I get to the restaurant, park my car in front of it, get inside just to see my wife staring at me horror-stricken. She gets up from the table and takes me outside of the restaurant, then proceeds to literally insult me for parking my Clio in front of the restaurant and in front of her table, saying that I embarrassed her and that I should have parked it somewhere hidden. I was completely at a loss for words. I asked her why, and she said that it was a cheap, non-luxury car, not representative of her lifestyle. She then gets back inside the restaurant, warning me not to embarrass her like this again. I attended the rest of the lunch in shock. That day I realized that that girl I had at my side wasn't my wife. It wasn't the girl I married anymore. My wife is now out of the house, celebrating a great year for the company, and I'm here at home writing this with the divorce papers in front of me. I don't think I can handle this situation anymore. I tried lots and lots of time to talk to her, to tell her how I feel, to tell her that she changed, that she's not the same woman I knew. But she just doesn't listen. She always says that she has no time and that she needs to work, or she tries to minimize the situation saying that it's not true and that she never changed. She wanted kids, and now she doesn't want them anymore, saying that they would rob her time from her career. She wanted to travel, but now she doesn't want to do it, for the same reason. Is she really the same woman I married? But still, I can't bring myself to talk about divorce with her, most likely because I hope that somewhere hidden inside of her there's still the woman I loved and still love. Even if it doesn't seem like the case. What is the fastest way you have seen someone ruin their life? My husband had a nice job as a high-level retail manager, before his store closed. He became a lead for less money in an inventory company. He was generally considered to be nice, but quiet. You'd see more of his personality when he was working on computers or video games or at the pool. General consensus was that he was a good guy, always ready to game with the kids. That's when a couple months into the relationship I started to notice little weird things that he would do. One day I came home from the grocery store and I caught him with his phone out almost as if he was filming something outside. As I got closer to the window to see my 10-year-old daughter swimming in the pool, I asked him why he was filming, and he just said that it was a candid video of her, and thought it would be cute. When I asked to look at the video, he just said it got messed up and he had already deleted it. This was a little suspicious to me, but to be honest the explanation wasn't the worst, so I just kind of shrugged it off. Less than a month after our 6th anniversary, I found a video on our tablet from a hidden camera in our bathroom that showed my 14-year-old niece unclothed. When I found it, I broke into tears. The man I had loved and trusted all these years with my life had something like this on his device, and I couldn't believe it. It looked like he kept the image on the cloud and would add it to whatever device he was using and then delete it. He just missed that last step, and that's when I found it. My husband must have heard me crying because he walked in and asked what was wrong. As soon as he saw the tablet, and my tears rolling down my face looking up at him, he realized what had happened. To my surprise he became rather violent, bringing out a side to this man that he had been hiding all along from me. I told him that if he laid a hand on me that I would call the police as I had already had my phone in hand ready to dial. Luckily, our daughter also walked in wondering what was going on, and I have a feeling this made him hide his true hatred towards me at that moment. The look in his eyes was not even close to anything I've ever seen. Those eyes used to resemble safety, and love to me all these years before, and now it was like a completely different beast in his body. If my daughter hadn't walked in, who knows what he would have done to me. I told him to leave the house, and that I had to think about all of this and confront him later. Surprisingly, he calmed down and said all right, but told me to not make any rash decisions until he got back. The bastard didn't even apologize or have any explanation, and those were his last words to me as he left. I called the police immediately and he never came home again. They found more images on his computer and a 20-minute video, full front view of his face, as he tries to hide the camera. He pleaded guilty and received 40 years with a 34-year, suspended sentence. He will have to register as a sex offender and has some pretty stiff rules to follow. No alcohol, no items that can connect to the internet unless he pays for a company to put monitoring software on every internet-accessible device. That day I found it is still ingrained in my head, and it keeps me up at night thinking about how long he could have possibly been doing this while we were together. Had he been doing it from the very start? A couple days after the whole ordeal, I remember the first incident with my daughter that I caught him with. It makes me sad knowing I accepted his explanation at the time and didn't challenge or look into it further, and for that I somehow blame myself. I have told every relationship I've been in, husband included, that this is one of the only things that will make me turn you in and walk away and never look back. He truly thought I would never leave him and was all surprised with a Pikachu face when I kept my promise. His actions caused him to lose everything he took for granted in the most painful way. Our daughter was 10, then, and for her all she knows is that he just disappeared one day. Now, I am watching her grow and mature into a beautiful person and he doesn't get the privilege of even knowing this beautiful child. I'm sure that separation has hurt him a lot, but you don't get trusted with any child, even your own, after you do something like that. My sister held a sleepover tonight but no one came. My sister invited 5 girls from the summer camp she goes to for a sleepover tonight and she was really excited. She is a shy person and extremely quiet but wanted to try and break out of her comfort zone this summer. She picked 5 girls from her class and all of them said they would come. She did not pick 5 random girls to invite to a sleepover. They are in the same grade and she has known all of them since 1st grade. They have gone to each other's birthday parties. I helped her clean her room and she picked out a movie for them to watch and I have never seen her so excited. Her friends were supposed to come at 5 p.m. tonight but by 7 p.m. she was starting to wonder where they were. With every minute that passed I saw her mood change and she started to give up and went to her room. At 9 p.m. my mom called one of the parents but they said they were out of town and forgot about the sleepover. They were lying because my mom works with the mother of that family and my mom saw that she posted that her family was at a baseball game on Facebook. I went to check on my sister and her eyes were red and she was laying under her covers. I laid down next to her and she was telling me how dumb she was for thinking people wanted to go to her sleepover. She just wants to fit in but for some reason she can't find someone who wants to hang out with her. I got her to come out from the covers and we ate the pizza my mom brought but I have never seen my sister so defeated. My mom and I don't know why she can't make any friends. She's into the same things the girls in her grade are and she isn't considered weird by the other kids in her class. She is shy but her social skills are fine and she gets along with people so it hurts to see her being alone. I told my girlfriend what happened and we agreed to have a sleepover with my sister tomorrow night but I wish my sister would find a friend who actually wants to be around her. She's a good person and I want her to feel like people enjoy being around her. Update, Saturday night, my girlfriend and I cleaned up my sister's room while she was out with my mom. We got her favorite movie and made chocolate chip cookies. She wasn't really in an energetic mood because of yesterday so we just sat in the backyard and played board games for a couple of hours. Then we went inside and all 3 of us watched the movie and went to sleep. She was really appreciative of my girlfriend and I especially my girlfriend. We have been together for 5 years and my sister and girlfriend have become pretty close. My girlfriend calls her a mini version of her. My sister is happy and that's all that matters. As for the parents, the mom who used the out-of-town excuse when she was at a baseball game stuck with that excuse. The other 4 all said they got the days mixed up even though the date and time was above the recent text messages. It doesn't matter though, my sister will find her way. This was a learning experience for all of us. Also, I saw some comments saying the other parents were not required to give an explanation why their child did not attend the sleepover. They aren't required to, but letting a 12-year-old girl and her mom know their child is not able to come is the courteous thing to do. Hopefully one day she will find her group as she grows up. My family and fiancé excommunicated me. Were in another state celebrating Christmas and they had posted pictures online. Everyone was there, my sisters, parents, grandparents and even my fiancé and his family. When I myself saw the photos, I couldn't stop crying as they all looked so happy. I cried for days and days before deciding to block them all. I even returned my engagement ring. My friend knew someone a couple hours away who was looking for some help in his restaurant, and he even had living arrangements above where he worked so I could get rent at a cheap price and work at the same time. I wanted to start over with my life as it hurt me that no one took my side and they all left me to fend for myself. I was able to move pretty quickly and was doing well. The apartment was tiny and I had to work 10+ hours almost every day, but I was able to save a lot of money. I'm not living in the apartment anymore. I was able to rent a much nicer condo, but I am still working at the restaurant as assistant manager. Now it has been roughly 2 years since I left and have not spoken to any of my family. I had no idea what was going on with them until I got a knock on my door. It was my ex-fiancé. I was shocked to say the least. All these feelings came rushing back and all I wanted to do was jump into his arms. But then I remembered the pain I had felt and tried to slam the door in his face, but he stopped it and asked that I let him explain. He said that Nikki had gotten married and she had confessed that she lied about the situation because she had found someone she loved so much and realized what a horrible thing she had done. I asked him how he found me and he said my friend told him. My entire family has been trying to get in touch with me and want to see me. I told him I needed time to see if I even wanted to have them in my life. He left and I have been a mess since. I don't know what to do. I know I will never ever forgive Nikki. She could rot for all I cared, but it's hard because my other family and fiancé didn't know she was lying, but I also felt like they abandoned me too quickly without letting me explain my side. I don't know if I should forgive them. Any advice would be very helpful. My family and fiancé excommunicated me after my sister sabotaged me. Part 2. The last time I spoke to you all, my fiancé had just visited me after 2 years saying my family and him wanted to reconnect after my sister sabotaged me to make me look like I cheated. Well, I have an update for you. So I never got back to my ex. I didn't know what to do, but eventually he must have given my phone number to my parents as they texted asking to meet up. I never replied and was planning on organizing a Zoom meeting but didn't need to as they also showed up at my door. Well, my father did. When I answered the door and saw him standing there, I ended up throwing up which he insisted on cleaning. When he was done, we sat down and I just bursted in tears. My emotions were all over the place and my father has worn the same cologne for a really long time, so when I smelt it, it just brought back all these memories. He tried to hug me but I pushed him away and asked what he was doing here. He went on to explain he and my mother are getting a divorce. He said he begged my mother to get in touch with me the minute I left, but she refused and said I was acting like a baby and if I wanted to leave them after doing something so horrible, then I could do things on my own from then on. I asked him how long it took them to notice I was gone. He said they arrived back home after New Year's Eve and were planning on inviting me over so we could talk. That's when they got in touch with my friend and she told them I left and she didn't know where I was. I asked him why he didn't listen to my side of the story and why they threw me away so easily. He just started crying. He said he never meant for things to get so out of hand and he wishes more than anything he could take it all back. I said when they found out Nikki was taking drugs and had dropped out of high school, they didn't throw her away. Instead we all went on a holiday so she could focus on things besides drugs, and during that trip, she got hooked on alcohol and each time they defended her over and over. He said he had no idea my mother was going to kick me out. He thought it was going to be for a few days but then they decided at the last minute to spend Christmas out of state. My mother apparently promised him I would be allowed back home after they got back. I said she threw away all my stuff but he said everything was still there and she lied about that. I asked him what had happened to Nikki and he said she is dead to him. He wants nothing to do with her but my mother has been crying to him, asking to forgive Nikki as she is not well and they had already lost one daughter. They cannot lose two. He blocked my mother and Nikki and has been on my ex's case about finding me. My ex caved in when my dad said he blocked my mother and Nikki and told him where I lived. I asked that he never show up again unless I give him permission and he agreed. He asked what would happen now and I said I really don't know and that he hurt me really bad. I then just went into detail about how much he hurt me and what it felt like seeing them so happy without me and how hard it has been. We were both crying by the end of it, but I was really glad I got it all out. It felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My dad then said he knew a few places around the area and would help get me a better apartment, and he said he would help get me a better job, but I told him I wouldn't be leaving this job as my boss helped me out so much and I wanted to repay him at all costs. I said I didn't want him to do anything for me, but that I do want to reconcile, but it has to be on my own terms and it is going to take a very, very long time to trust him again, and I may never trust him again. He said he would do anything to make up for what he did. I asked him why Nikki did this and if she said anything about it. Well, she said she thought my ex deserved better than me and she wanted to see him happy because he was making too many sacrifices in the relationship. She loved him like a brother and wanted to break the engagement off. So that night she asked her friend to come and escort me out of the club so she could get photos and to take me home so her plan could work. She said nothing sensual happened. I went to sleep on the sofa and that was it. He was up playing video games all night until I woke up, which he has proof of apparently. My dad was planning on getting my stuff from my mother's house and bringing it to me, but I told him I didn't want those things anymore. I then went to ask about Nikki's husband and he said my mother has been hush-hush with the entire situation, but he had his number and wrote it down for me. After my dad left, I decided to call Nikki's husband. I was sweating the entire time and felt so sick. What if I could hear her in the background? Well, anyhow, when he picked up, I just spit everything out, which I deeply regret because I should have eased into it for him. He sounded really confused and I explained the entire situation again. I even went into detail about her drug and alcohol problems. I was honestly expecting him to curse me out and defend Nikki. Instead, he let out a long sigh and well, turns out, he had a feeling she wasn't exactly innocent. Turns out her and his sister have been having problems and she has been spouting non-stop lies about his sister and has caused a huge rift between them. His sister didn't even attend their wedding. I told him I was sorry but he should make things right with his sister because Nikki was the problem, not her. We spoke a little more and he hung up. I'm not entirely sure what he is going to do with that information. I hope he cuts his losses and leaves her because he sounded like a really nice person, and even he has lost his own sister because of Nikki. So I have decided to reconcile with my dad. My mother has always run the show their entire marriage, so the fact he is putting his foot down and divorcing her and going no contact with Nikki shows he is serious about wanting to make amends. I don't think I will ever reconcile with my mother, as she thinks Nikki is a victim also in all this, and at this point I don't care to listen to her excuses. If she reaches out and we talk, I will update the post again. For my ex, I haven't had the time to meet with him and talk, though my dad mentioned he wanted to come with my dad, but he told him I would be too overwhelmed if both were there, and seeing them separated will help make clear decisions. He also mentioned my ex was arrested for assaulting Nikki's friend who lied about the entire situation. He was being charged, but the charges were dropped a few days later. I will update the post again when I have time to speak to my ex. Thank you guys for listening to this story. It's something that has been bottled up in me for a long time. My husband forgot the past 8 years and now wants a divorce. I have been with my husband Josh since we were seniors in high school. We broke up shortly after high school graduation but got back together a year afterwards. We overcame long distance, educational and job difficulties, unplanned pregnancies, medical issues, everything. He is my first everything and I cannot imagine life without him. But now I have to get used to it. 2 months ago, Josh woke up next to me shocked. He asked what I was doing on his chest and who I was. He likes to sometimes wake me up saying, "Hey, who's this beautiful lady on my chest?" But this was different, and he wouldn't let me touch him, and he started demanding to know where he was and where a woman named Lisa was. I was confused and scared to say the least. I tried to explain that I'm his wife and that he's home safe. Josh yelled he would have never married me in a million years. He started running around our house looking at photos of us and out of the windows. He refused to let me get too close, so I called his mom and she talked to him on his phone. He freaked out that I knew his passcode and he started wailing about what was going on. I called his therapist and he was taken to the hospital. He was put on $5,150 and I had his mom come take him when it was up. When he got home a week later, he accepted that I was his wife but kept saying us being together was wrong. He didn't go to work for a bit and I noticed he was obsessively searching for a woman named Lisa who went to a college he turned down for me. I have never seen this woman and I wondered if he possibly had an affair in the past. I found messages to a number from him a week later where he begged Lisa to talk to him, but she said she had no idea who he was. The phone wasn't public, so he must have it memorized. I asked his mom about it and she asked him, to which he said she's the love of my life. He stopped and was so distraught he tried to take his own life. He went back to the facility and was evaluated again. I was given options but I wanted him home. So he was prescribed some medication. His sister stayed with us until he seemed stable. But Josh would act so coldly towards me, asking questions about why we got back together and how upset he was that we were. When we broke up originally, I cursed him out for 3 hours straight and later found out he had made a move on the girl he told me not to worry about. He would say he didn't know how he could love me again after all I said. He refused to do chores and would stay out into the night for hours. Over a month ago he came to me and asked for a divorce. He said when he told me that I should have found someone better after high school, and that I should have done that because he can't bring himself to love me. How can I be with someone who is so obviously embarrassed to be with the old me? I told him he's not that insecure little boy anymore and he was the love of my life. He had been publicly embarrassed years ago in regards to me. He used to be insecure that I was too good for him and that everyone knew that. My father, after meeting him, told me he was a loser. But I reminded Josh I chose him because I love him. I told him we moved past that and I thought we were good. He didn't believe me and said he couldn't imagine being happy with me. He left that night and was fine coming to get his things to move in with his sister. He looks at me with nothing but apathy and it hurts. His sister urged him to try again and he came back, and I told him I don't want to throw away 10 years together over a mental break. We were both thriving career-wise and had virtually no issues up to this point. We were renovating this very house together. He agreed to try and we were fine for more than a month. It was like trying to date him again, but everything seemed to moving in a positive direction. We even slept together and I thought that was proof things were great. He was so caring and attentive like I remembered, so I figured he was getting there. He initiated it and wouldn't stop telling me how beautiful I was, like he remembered. Then 3 nights ago something happened. I came home from work to find Josh sitting quietly at the kitchen table, drinking. He never does that. He had been waiting for me and then slammed divorce papers and his phone onto the table. His phone was open to text messages with explicit photos and mentioning of a night together with a woman named Lisa. Not the same one, but apparently someone he met on Tinder. I will never forget the venom in his voice when he said, "Now will you divorce me?" I went to our room and locked the door and just cried. I heard him leave and his sister took him away. She texted me an apology and said she's turning him back into the facility, but I told her to just take him and I'll sign the papers, but not to tell him I was. I'm floored. My mother and brother are flying to help me with this. Everyone is shocked and I cannot fathom what has happened. We had been trying for a baby too. I'm seeing if I miss my period because we did it unprotected, but now I wonder if I should get tested for STDs too. I accidentally committed into a family with my best friend and it's the best thing to ever happen to me. I had a very rough childhood growing up. I didn't have a dad, and my mom was never really there because she had a rough battle with health issues and got hooked on narcotics. I had friends growing up, but I had my best friend since I was 12. Her name is Lily. We have been extremely close due to our childhood issues and we had always been there for each other. We talked about being together, but got cold feet because we were scared that if it didn't work, we couldn't recover from that. When I was 18, I didn't really want to go to college. School had never been for me. So I went into a trade. I work long hours, but it's been worth it and I make solid money right now for my position. I'll come back to this in a bit. When we were 19, Lily got pregnant by her boyfriend. The dude somehow managed to avoid child support payments and broke up with her, and has not seen the kid once in his life. Complete deadbeat. Makes me disgusted. Lily was scared, but I told her I would be here when she needed it. She didn't have parents that would help, but I told her I'd help reckon when the kid gets here. Lo and behold, she gave birth to a beautiful little girl named Kelsey. I was there when she was born and it was a weird moment. I don't know how to explain it, but I did feel happy for her. Now we're 21, and ever since then this little girl has had me wrapped around her finger. I've done my round of the diapers, bottles, middle of the night screaming, etc. Every day I get home from work we sit there and we watch her little shows, and we spend a lot of time together as the three of us as well. When we walk, she grabs my pointer finger with her whole hand because it's so little. She stands up and kisses me on the cheek after I change her, and she loves her snuggles where she just lays on top of me with her head laid up against my chest. As of recently, she has begun speaking. She has been calling me daddy. I've been feeling really weird about it lately. Feeling like it's not right, and that someday she needs to know the truth. I talked to Lily about it one night and got her opinion of it. She sat there with a slight grin and then she came up behind me and hugged me. She said you're the best dad she could ever ask for. And then proceeded to tell me we'll worry about talking to her when she understands. As far as she is concerned, you are her daddy, and you are to me as well. I turned around and hugged her. We had a long talk about what's been going on lately as we have been engaging in not so just friends activities, and she just said it like this: I like our family. I just kind of froze for a second and asked her, is this what we want to do? And she followed up by saying, I think we've been doing this for a while now, and then laughed. We had a great moment and agreed to be a family. I had told her I needed to run to the drugstore for some diapers for Kelsey. On the way there, I bursted into tears. I cried for maybe a good 30 minutes. I don't even know how to describe what I was thinking and feeling, but I was happy. I just know that there isn't a thing in this world I wouldn't do for those two. It feels like I can relax and reflect on everything that's happened to this point. But also I don't. I basically have a family I'm looking out for. Like no matter what happens, I have people who will depend on me, and something like that makes me want to be the best man I can. In about another year, I will have my official license for my trade, giving me a substantial pay raise and a new job that I already have lined up. I've already started looking at houses and rings. We've also talked about having our own once I get my license. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I wanted to share it with someone, but I don't really have those people in my life. I am happy, and you all deserve to be too. I got the sweetest revenge on my roommate after the heinous things she did to me. In 2008 I had just left my husband. I caught him cheating multiple times, and I was just over it. A new girl, we will call her Amy, started at my job and we made a fast friendship. I was in the middle of packing up and moving out of my house. I needed a roommate for a new apartment I was looking at because my wages weren't going to pay the bills, so we moved in together and lived peacefully together for a while. I was moving on with my life. I had gotten a better paying job, was spending time with my friends, and I felt okay with life at the time. At the time I was 25, single, and not looking for anything serious, so I had a friends with benefits who would stop over a few times a week. Amy was cool with it on the surface. It did not affect her in any way. My friend didn't hang out at our place. He didn't eat at our place. He didn't use our household supplies. My relationship with him affected her exactly 0%, but I guess she was a little annoyed about the fact that I was getting some attention and she was not. She would flirt with him, go visit him where he worked, etc., but he was absolutely not interested in her. This is where things started to go downhill. For context, she had been married a few times, she was 13 years older than me, and all the dads had full custody of their respective kids. She was dating someone, but he was already in a relationship, so he wasn't about to commit to anything besides stopping by for 30 minutes after he worked the night shift every day. I tried to point out all the red flags, but she was convinced it was love. This dude used to hit me constantly in front of her. He was very open about being in a committed relationship with his girlfriend, so I have no idea why Amy thought this was going anywhere. After a few months I met someone I wanted to be serious with, so we started dating. We will call the guy Tom. Tom and I got serious pretty fast. He was living in a horrible situation, so he moved in with Amy and I pretty quickly. I think it was after about a month of dating. So we have our room and she has her own room. The bills went from a 50-50 split to 3-way split to make sure things were still even. We had a shared kitchen, living room, and bathroom. After Tom moved in, she started openly hitting on him in front of me. Every guy I had at my house she had to hit on, even if they were just friends. None of them ever took her up on it. Every single one turned her down, and I think this added greatly to her oncoming behavior. Over the next couple of weeks Amy did a complete 180. She stopped paying rent, refused to buy any food, and would just eat whatever Tom and I bought, and would not wash her dishes. We had 2 cats, one was hers and one mine, and she would never clean the litter in her room, so her cat would use our hallway floor as a bathroom every single day. Every day when I got home from work there was a big steaming pile of cat shit right inside my front door, sitting in the middle of a giant puddle of urine. My cat was locked in my room at night with her own supplies, so there was 0 chance it was her. It was the same thing every morning by the front door. Whenever she was done eating the food she stole from me, she would set her plate with the leftovers on the kitchen floor for her cat to pick at. She would leave the plate there for days. To the point that if I didn't pick them up, there would be multiple plates on the floor with food in various stages of decay. All of my dishes started going missing, except for the cat's plates, of course. And what dishes were left, she refused to wash ever. She used my toilet paper, my laundry soap, even my tampons. This went on for about 2 months and it just kept getting progressively worse. She would use panty liners every day and would change them multiple times a day and stuff them in the garbage can in the bathroom. She would leave it there completely overflowing and spilling onto the floor for days until I caved and put on gloves and threw them out. The trash can would be full in about a week, so this happened a few times. That's not even the worst of it. My expensive DSLR camera went missing. I was a photography hobbyist at the time, but it was my dream to be a professional photographer and own my own photography business. I would shoot stuff for friends and family as practice, and one day I grabbed my camera bag from the shared living room, and as soon as I picked it up, I felt my heart sink into my stomach. You know that instant dread that grips you the second you realize something truly gut-wrenching has happened. I opened the bag and of course the camera is gone. That was an expensive camera for that time of my life, and it was a gift from my parents, so I was truly devastated. I couldn't prove a thing, and I wasn't even sure how long it had been missing. It could have been her boyfriend that took it, but either way it was gone. So now this is it. This is the last straw. I need this girl out. I went from nice girl to a fucking psycho in about 30 seconds. I'm not the violent type and I hate confrontation. I'm not waiting for a fucking eviction to go through, and I really didn't have the money for that anyway, so here's where I start my petty revenge. Amy wants to live here with me rent-free, stealing my shit, hitting on my boyfriend, and neglecting her cat, so be it. But it's going to be on my fucking terms. One vital piece of information: in my divorce, the dickhead moved back in with mom and I took everything from the house to my new apartment, so I owned everything and the lease was in my name. I started by changing the Wi-Fi password and the computer password. The following week I had my cable company come and remove the cable lines to her room. I bought a small fridge for my room and a cabinet and put all my food and personal supplies in my bedroom and put a secure lock on my door. I hid my pots and pans. I locked up the soap and toilet paper. The cabinets were empty. I paid for it all, and I would be the only one using it. When her cat shit on the floor, I would pick it up and smear it on her bedroom doorknob. Overflowing bathroom trash cans filled to the brim with her panty liners were dumped on her bed. I removed the knobs to the washer and the dryer. I did everything possible to make her life uncomfortable. I did other small stuff. Anything that came to mind. A few months prior, Amy and I had been working at the same store and she borrowed another coworker's laptop. She ended up getting fired, but she never gave the laptop back and the coworker was really trying to get it back from her. Amy ghosted her, of course, so while she was out one day, I went in and took the laptop and gave it back to its rightful owner. Amy called the cops on me and said I stole her computer, but I explained what happened. She admitted to the cops that the computer wasn't hers and the cops said it wasn't their problem anymore. That one really made her hate me. She wasn't working at the time, so it's not like she had money to do anything or buy anything. She was literally just existing in a room in my apartment. She would disappear during the day, but I have no idea where she was going. She moved out after about 6 weeks. When she moved out of my apartment, I didn't even know she had left. I just noticed she wasn't coming or going for about a week. So Tom and I cleaned out her room. She left clothes, broken furniture, a cardboard dresser, and 5 39-gallon garbage bags of trash we collected from the mass piles of panty liners, rotting food, and ordinary trash we found in the room. It's a miracle we didn't have roaches. I found all my missing dishes, silverware, and cups all covered in food and grossness. I just threw it all away. I wish I still had the photos though. Oddly enough, about 6 months later, I opened my back door to take out the trash and my camera was in a bag hanging from my doorknob. I know Amy definitely didn't return it. For about 2 years after, every time I would find out that Amy was living with someone new, I would message them and send them the photos of her room. Papers in the trash that had her name on them. And I would tell them the whole story. One time it caused the people she was living with to throw her shit out on the porch. She had just moved in and they had small kids and they didn't want to risk it with her. I stopped after that. She knew it was me telling them too, so I figured I had sufficiently made my point. My wife can't come to terms with the fact that we are not and never will be rich. I'm at my breaking point. My wife and I met in college. She was in a marketing program, and I was in computer science. She ended up not finishing her degree, but got a fairly good starting job in the field anyway because her friend's dad hired her for his business. While she got her job through nepotism, I do know that she is talented and good at it. I finished my degree. We don't live in a high-dollar area for careers and have stayed because it's close to her family. She started out at about $35K a year, and I started out at about $65K a year. Flash forward to now. She is making $50K a year and I'm making $100K. It still doesn't feel like we are doing all that well. Sure, the bills are always paid and we can eat at the occasional nice restaurant, but we were barely able to afford a lower middle-class house. We can't afford to go on jet-setting exotic vacations. We don't live paycheck to paycheck, but the money just doesn't ever go as far as you would think. The thing is, I'm happy. I grew up dirt poor and my parents were always stressed. My wife and I never are. We have a nice albeit modest house. We can afford our small hobbies and comforts. We can go on vacations within the continental US, we just can't really afford to go to Hawaii or the Caribbean. We aren't rich, but we have it so much better than so many people. I feel truly thankful and content. She, on the other hand, has fallen deeper and deeper into depression, and it's always the same thing she talks about. She wants a new car. She wants hugely expensive renovations to the house, that we don't actually need. The house was updated when we bought it. She wants to go shopping for whatever specific brand of clothes or makeup. She wants a 2-week vacation in Maui or Paris. She recently just keeps talking about how she's not where she thought she'd be at this point in life. She goes on and on about it. She compares us to our friends and how good they have it. The thing is, those friends she is comparing us to are people who come from generational wealth. They have it good because their parents handed it to them. She can't seem to come to terms with just how good we truly have it. All she can see is what we don't have. The most frustrating thing is that a lot of our financial situation, that, again, I'm comfortable with, is held back by her. She's making about as much money as she can in her field without a degree. I am making twice what she is now, and I'm not done moving up the ladder. I've tried over and over again to get her to go back to school, but she just won't. At this point it might not even matter. Her credits are so old I don't even know if they would count anymore and she'd probably have to start over. On top of all that, she makes comments like I thought when I married a software engineer that I wouldn't have to work anymore, basically alluding to the fact that I'm not making enough to fit her lifestyle. I love her, but I'm so tired. I'm tired of coming home from a busy day at work, thinking that I'll finally get to relax and decompress, only to hear her constant negativity about money. I've talked with her so many times over the years and in so many ways, but I just can't get through to her. We've tried couples counseling, but it did little. I've begged her to do personal counseling, but she isn't interested. I'm at the end of my rope and I'll take any advice out there. At this point I almost want to tell her to divorce me already so she can find a nasty 50-year-old divorcee to be her sugar daddy. What can I do to help her accept our lot in life? Or is it time that I stop wasting energy and let her go? Keeping me up at night with your parties? Enjoy being shamed on the national news. In September of 2020, the apartment next to mine was rented out to two young women, both students. After they settled in a bit, it turned out they wanted to have a party. No big deal, except Belgium was in full lockdown at this point due to COVID, and you were supposed to only have one fixed visitor over. But then again, to be young again, etc., so I didn't really care. During this time, I was working in healthcare. I work with the mentally disabled, but I volunteered for the ad hoc COVID team, meaning I got called upon to tend to those residents who were sick and needed quarantining, or were effectively diagnosed with COVID. This meant pretty long working hours, and I spent about 10 to 11 hours a day at work, with a full-hour bike ride to and from work. Needless to say, I was pretty tired pretty much all the time. So I wasn't looking forward to the noise from a party, but I'm pretty chill and know that living in the city, some noise is to be expected. So they are having their party, and I can stand some noise and music. But this party was fucking wild. People shouting full on, in the hallway. Wrecking things and spilling alcohol everywhere. At about 4 in the morning, I introduced myself to the neighbors and asked them when they could expect their company of about 20 plus people to leave, and if they could refrain from having a party the next day, as I have to work and get up at 6 a.m. every day. So they promised they would keep it down the rest of the night and that they wouldn't have a party the next day. Plot twist, they didn't keep it down, and they did have another party the next night. And then did another one the day after. At this point, I had been going a full 3 nights without sleep and was nearing neurosis. Every night I had talked to the girls and every night they would be full of apologies and stuff, but nothing would change. I also felt terrible when I had to enter their place, because it would be absolutely packed with people and I worked with some very vulnerable people at work who I wouldn't want to spread COVID to. This was pre-tests, pre-vaccines, pre-much of the knowledge we now have about COVID. Luckily the weekend came and they went to their parents and I could recover a bit. Suffice to say, I wasn't really liking my new neighbors. During the next few weeks, they refrained from big parties, but they would have a constant flood of people coming over during the night. And by constant, I mean constant. Like their bell would ring 70 times a night and people would always be coming or going. And those people would be drunk and loud. Our communal hallway is pretty much an echo chamber because it's all stone and any noise will travel throughout the building. Basically I couldn't rely on sleep at night. It drove me crazy. I could only sleep Friday through Sunday, because then they would go off to their parents or whatever. I couldn't grasp how they could know this many people that would always be coming and going. During one night, while knocking on their door to complain about the noise, I encountered my upstairs neighbor, and decided that we would have to join forces to get this to stop. My neighbor told me some important bits of information. The reason there were people coming and going all the time was because they used their apartment as a makeshift bar and hangout. During this time, bars were closed due to COVID and all those students were using the big apartment to hang out. Moreover, across the street was another frat house with 5 boys living there, and that too was a secret hangout. So people would hang out at those 2 places and cross the street if they wanted a different atmosphere or wanted to see their other friends, etc., and the boys from across the street would also come over 15 times a night. Most visitors seemed to be law students or affiliated with them. Basically our communal hallway was just a part of their cafe space now. So we tried talking to the girls. Then we started to talk to the visitors. None of them had any sympathy for us when we were asking them to be quiet at 4 a.m. in the morning. Most of them just laughed at us, as we were the pesky neighbors, no doubt. Even more of them were just so wasted that they didn't know what they were doing. So we started calling the police dozens of times. Most of the time, they weren't let in and the police told us they couldn't do anything. We kept calling, as we wanted a record of our calls in the system. Belgium was still in full lockdown at this point and what they were doing was full of illegal. Even so, the police told us their hands were tied if they wouldn't open the door. When the police couldn't help, I turned to the next best thing. I'm a social worker and so I have no problems looking up information and calling around to look for help. This is what I did. Most places, student unions, police, town hall, were understanding but couldn't really do much. So I acted on the suggestion of the upstairs neighbor and contacted one of the girls' dean. I sent him a nice email about how I was sorry for bothering him and taking up his time, but I had this big group of students from his faculty ganging up every night and maybe he wanted to know about it since they were breaking every possible COVID rule that existed at that time? Especially since me and my neighbor were about to go to the papers with this story, as secret lockdown parties were becoming a thing in the papers at this point. This dean called me back right away and we had a nice talk about our problems. He told me he was on it. So basically what he did was call the law student girl, and her parents. Big drama ensued and we finally got to sit down with the girls and they finally sounded like they were sorry. Tears were shed for which I had no patience for, to be honest. We learned that the police had actually been inside a few times and they were issued tickets for having secret parties. Those were €300 each a pop, so no idea why they didn't just stop. We learned they were not happy because the dean had called them up at 11 o'clock and they were still asleep. To which I said, well, there's your problem. You are still asleep at 11 o'clock. I'm up at 6 every day and you girls haven't been a bit understanding about that. So we got to feel a bit like we got our revenge and we got to vent, but we kept it kind of nice and parted on good terms, hoping that this would be it and we could live together as nice neighbors. But if that were the case, I wouldn't be here, right? You'd think they would have gotten the point now, and would refrain from making noise and partying. Well, you'd be wrong. Basically what they did was they moved to the frat house across the street and started partying there. There were slightly less people running to and fro, but the noise was still a problem, and we were now in the middle of the second COVID wave, and these people were meeting up with big groups like crazy, while I hadn't seen a soul in almost a year. Never mind the people at my work, who were forbidden from even going to their own family. The whole thing was just ridiculous. My upstairs neighbor happened to film such a party across the street and had sent the clip to me. We were thinking about going to the press with our story but weren't really sure if it would be a good idea. So I posted the clip of the party on the subreddit of our country to test the waters. It got quite some comments and upvotes, and it seemed most people were also sick of people disregarding the rules and having secret parties. After some talks with the upstairs neighbor, we decided to contact the press and simultaneously go up a step in the university hierarchy and contact the vice rector that had the power to start up a disciplinary case against the students. This person is one of 12 vice rectors for a total campus of about 15,000 students, so quite high up. Things moved fast. Local news actually picked up our story from Reddit and contacted me, and we gave some background info. They confirmed with the police that cops had been to our address dozens of times and across the street and weren't let in most of the time. We mentioned that the university was involved and that we hoped they would finally intervene. The next day, the piece was on their website. It went viral there, and got promoted to the sites of most national newspapers. Its headline was sensational enough, mentioning the dozens of times police had shown up and also mentioning how healthcare workers were being kept up by selfish students. At the same time, the vice rector contacted us to take our statements, which we already had prepared on paper, and informed us they would investigate and could possibly start disciplinary actions. At the same time, more reporters were contacting me throughout the day, and we made sure to mention that to her and link the university to the printed articles. The next day, while at work, I got a message from the upstairs neighbor that a film crew from the National News Watch was at our doorstep. He declined to talk to them, and I would have done the same, since this was getting pretty big now, but they made a segment anyway. And sure enough, that night at 7 p.m., here was my street and a short section about cops standing in front of a closed door a dozen times and the local press cop talking about the troubles of closed doors. Best part about it was that a student from the offending frat house across the street had let the film crew in, and said on camera exactly what we were accusing them of towards the university, that they had been having parties and didn't let the cops in, and that they had done it multiple times. No idea what made him think that was a good idea. Anyway, trying not to make a huge story even longer, the press died down some time later and the disciplinary action from the university went through. Before the hearing, we sat down with the girls from our block and cleared some things up. We wanted to live like normal people together, and we tried to make some amends. Because we put in a kind of good word for them, they got the lighter end of the stick, 40 hours of community service and some probation. The guys across the street got 80 hours each, and each had to write us a letter of apology, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading every time I got one. Sad part is, most of them sounded just like dumb young kids, but that was after getting called out on the news and being part of a disciplinary action. But we never wanted to escalate things this far. Some noise is to be expected when living in the same building, and we were never going to go to these extremes for some expected noises. But these people went to the extremes, and so we were forced to do the same. Rest of the year, a simple message on WhatsApp was enough to silence any noises we had coming from their apartment. If anything, I hope they learned that even very polite and chilled people can become very upset when presented with sleep deprivation and excessive noise. Idea what had happened until my brother told him this morning, or else he would have told me sooner. My drink had been spiked by my brother. Apparently his friends just thought I was a lightweight, so if not, this is where the stories end for now. It's late. I'm tired. I regret ever posting here. I broke my son and his girlfriend up, and he doesn't know it was me. I broke up my son and his girlfriend. They had been dating for almost a year, and seemed very happy. For backstory, my son moved out pretty soon after his biological father passed. He told me he wanted to expand on life, because he was nervous he would waste it away being depressed over the death of someone so important to him. I understood completely and allowed him space and freedom, but we talked daily and he visited all the time. After a while of living alone, he moved back. It was around this time that he introduced me to Kaylee. Me and Kaylee got along immediately. She lacked a mother in her life, and I think she was quick to establish that relationship with me. Off the bat I noticed she was extremely paranoid and had extreme trust issues, but she wasn't toxic or manipulative, just anxious about where my son was going after work. She'd ask me and I'd answer with he went to his friend Mike's house. They hang out to play PlayStation with each other. We both genuinely believed that my son was at Mike's house, and we had no reason to suspect he wasn't. One night, after my son came home to pick up his PS4 to hang out with Mike, Kaylee asked me to pick up some tampons and Tylenol for her. She lived close and her periods were always super intense, so I was used to going out late into the night to help her. My son gets out of work at 4 p.m. and is usually home or at Kaylee's place by 5:30 p.m., 6 p.m. at the latest. It was 6 and he hadn't swung by to drop off his PS4, so I shot him a text before I left the house to let him know why I was gone. It was something like, "Hey, Kaylee is on her period, so I'm heading out to grab supplies. You okay?" He answered me while I was driving, and I checked it when I got to the store. It was something like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Mike needed help building a shelf he bought, so I'm staying a little later." I sent back some message saying okay, be safe, all of that mother stuff. But I was not ready to see Mike, working the cash register, smiling at me as soon as I walked in. I hadn't forgotten he worked here, but obviously, figured it was his day off. I smiled back, but immediately I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he means he is building it for Mike, while he works? I couldn't even think straight. I just got the tampons, some snacks and Tylenol for Kaylee and went to the register. Mike obviously started small talk with me. Paraphrasing because my memory is bad, but it went something like this. Hi Mrs. Last name. Hello, Mike. How are you doing? I'm alright. Getting some supplies for my son's girlfriend. I remembered he laughed. Speaking of your son, I haven't seen him in a few weeks. I need him to give me my PS4 controller he borrowed. Can you tell him that? I felt sick again. I didn't want to put my son in the spotlight, so I didn't mention the stories my son had been feeding me. I just smiled and said, I'll let him know. I paid for my stuff and left quickly. I drove to Kaylee's house and gave her the supplies, but I didn't know what to say, or how to say it. She was smiling and laughing, and looked carefree. She asked me where my son was. I couldn't lie to her, I couldn't. So I answered honestly. I don't know. I didn't know where he was, or who he was with. I just told her to call him and ask. She thanked me and I left her house. Later that night, at around 8 p.m., my son finally came home. I didn't say much to him, just asked him if he had fun. He said yeah, and went to his room. I knew I had to tell Kaylee. Soon after, I went into my room and called her. I informed her of what Mike had said, and how late he had gotten home. She told me that he said he was home hours ago, just tired so he wasn't going to visit. I could tell she was crying, and I asked her if she wanted me to come over. I went to her house and we talked about everything, and she told me she didn't want anything to do with him, and wanted to break up with him immediately. I told her she could, and if she wanted, she could be honest and say I told her. After I comforted her for a few hours, she asked if she could still contact me, even if she wasn't with my son. I said yes, but honestly, I'm hesitant about it. I love her, but it feels off to me. I would still help her, though. Fast forward a few days and my son comes crying to me that Kaylee broke up with him and isn't giving him any reason. I, of course, comforted him too. He said that she needed time to think about it and would tell him why when she knows what to say, but for now, she is supposedly speechless. I was too, so I don't blame her. He cried for hours in his room, and in my arms, and regardless of what he did, of what I did, I comforted him. I want to tell him what I know, and I feel bad that he doesn't know. But Kaylee didn't tell him anything yet, so I might wait. Honestly, I feel stuck. This isn't just about cheating, even though I think he is. This is about trust, and how he is lying to me, and his girlfriend. We both know there is a possibility he isn't cheating, but he shouldn't have to lie if he has nothing to hide. Did I overstep my boundaries or did I do the right thing? To be honest, I'm not sure. What are all of your thoughts? I broke my son and his girlfriend up and he doesn't know it was me. Part 2. I wasn't going to make an update for a few days or weeks, but I took some advice from messages I got. I just wanted to clear a few things up first. I gave my son space and freedom, but I wanted him to be able to take time for me entirely if he wished. Throughout his teen years, whenever he was upset, he would ask me to leave him alone. I would oblige, but honestly if he didn't speak to me for more than 3 days I would just ask if he was okay. After his biological father died, I told him he could have a break from talking if he wanted, and I would wait for the okay to contact him. The break only lasted for maybe a week and he wanted to call me and visit. For the actual update, Kaylee decided to give him a call. She talked things out with her sister and decided to ask him. Apparently, he was cheating, but told her that it was because she was on her period and very sensitive to everything. He said he had done it 3 other times, all while she is on her period. She called me and told me before my son told me, but in his defense, he was busy explaining things to his girlfriend and now Mike who he accidentally wrapped into this. It's only 12 in the afternoon, and he wants to tell me in detail after work, which I told him was okay. He told me he was sorry for lying, and I told him it was okay but it hurt my feelings. I didn't mention this in the post or to him, but his biological dad cheated on me and that is why we are apart. He cheated on me before I was pregnant with my son, and for the first year of our marriage. I did not want my son to think that was okay. I talked to Kaylee and she is just head over heels for my son, and said if he promises not to do it again she would stay with him. I haven't told him that because that is not my business, they can talk about that. My son has sent me a few messages since about work, but he seems extremely sorry. I am a bit disappointed in him, but I think it's because of what I went through and how hard being a single mother after the man you thought loved you just left. Kaylee said that she would try to be a more attentive girlfriend, which honestly sucks to hear because this is not her fault. I am not going to dictate their relationship and tell her to find someone else, but it does shock me that she can forgive. As much as I want to be mad at my son, I really can't. I've never gotten mad at him before and I think this situation just brought me back to everything that happened when he was little. I hope my son can learn from this. Tonight when we talk I'm going to be a little strict on him, obviously, but again he is an adult. If he says he is going to cheat on her, I cannot stop him. I really hope he learns. I think I found my brother who ran away 9 years ago, and I don't know how to approach him. My younger brother ran away from home when I was 14. Apparently he really angered my mother one time and she decided to beat him and told him to go away and that he's not her child anymore after he broke a new TV while playing football in the house. She says she didn't mean it and was just disciplining him and said that in the heat of the moment. My brother was always one of those troublesome kids, carefree, a little too adventurous, but he had a good heart and I loved him very much. The next day after I came home from school, he didn't do the same. Apparently he had not gotten on the bus, and the school had called my parents expressing their concern. At first we thought he would just come back, then hours went by, and we started to get worried. After a day of him not coming back we started to search for him. We asked around, called the cops and filed a missing person report. We searched for him for a long time and never found him. His disappearance tore my family apart. My dad blamed my mom for his disappearance and they divorced shortly after my 15th birthday. The relationship between my grandparents and my mom deteriorated as well. Fast forward to about 3 months ago I got a job as an intern at a logistic company in my country. I am an assistant as a driver dispatcher. One of the driver's names caught my attention a week ago. It was exactly the same as my brother's. The driver came back about 2 months ago from his shipment and I have been kind of observing him. He kind of looks like my brother. He resembles my dad, and I don't know if I'm making these observations because I want it to be him or because the resemblance is actually there. Now I've been sleepless for days wondering if I should approach him. What if it's not him? I am a shy person and not really good with people. Will he think I'm crazy? Should I at least do some more homework before I approach him? And what should I tell my parents? Well, I approached him a day later, and it went better than I had anticipated. He recognized me even before I could tell him everything I had rehearsed. Apparently he had looked me up online, and since I had no social media except for lurking on Twitter and Reddit, he could hardly find anything concrete. So the only pictures of me he could find were from my best friend's Instagram post a couple of months ago, and he knew her and they were kind of friends. I asked why he didn't reach out, and well, he said that he was afraid that I was mad at him and will never forgive him for running away and leaving me. I was completely taken back by that because I never saw it that way. I was a bit mad because he had me worried about him for years, but finding him alive and well completely dwarfs any anger, sadness, or disappointment I had. Those may wonder what happened after he left home, and let me tell you, it's not been easy for him. Being homeless, abusing drugs, dealing drugs, serving jail time a couple of times, depression, harmful thoughts, but it all worked out for him when an old family in a charity program found him at 16 and helped him out. He didn't want to come back, but was forced to deal drugs. It's common in my country where young kids or orphans are either abducted or forced to sell drugs. Well, we have been hanging out a lot. There have been a lot of tears, and catching up to do. He asked about my dad because he had tried to look for him too, but I told him that our dad left the country a few years back with his new wife and kid. He said he forgave our mom, but just didn't want to see her yet. I honestly couldn't blame him for that, and we decided to just keep contact between us. Well, fast forward to 1 week ago. My brother finally decided to get in contact with both my mom and dad, and the reactions were mixed. My father was overly joyful and happy on the phone from what my brother said. He also said that he might have heard him cry, and that's something that my dad never does. My mom apparently didn't reply for a couple days. She probably had no clue what to do. All this guilt was weighing down on her for so long, and hearing from the person that caused all of that can cause mixed reactions. My brother was worried that she was mad at him, but I told him that that was probably not the case, and indeed it wasn't. It was actually the opposite. My mother called him a day later after my brother expressed his concerns to me, and she was sobbing. She couldn't stop apologizing for all the things she had said or done to him back in the day. She talked about how his appearance deeply affected her for all these years, and that a day didn't go by that she didn't stop thinking about him. She was worried that he would be so mad at her, but he forgave her on the phone, and told her that he wanted to work things out between everyone in the family. Although my mom and dad seeing each other again is slim, my brother building back his connections with them and me has made me really happy for the last couple days. It's like his reappearance lifted the dark gloom over me for the last 9 years of my life, and it felt like I was in some way complete again. My one and only other sibling, my blood, is finally back in my life, and I couldn't be happier. I told my husband that I stalked him 2 years before I formally met him. His reaction shocked me. I married my husband about 1.5 years ago. The first time I saw my husband I was a freshman in high school, he was a freshman in college. He was walking his dog at the park, when he stopped to talk to my brother because they happened to go to high school together. That was the moment I became hooked. That same day I found his Instagram, his family's social media, and also where he lived since my brother offered to walk him home while I tagged along. When I got home that day I knew I wanted him, but I was only 14 while he was 18, so I came up with a plan. I found out his younger brother was only 1 year younger than me and would be attending my current high school. I figured that I had to befriend his younger brother by any means possible next year when he moves up as a freshman while I become a sophomore, and I did. It took around halfway of my junior year where we became best friends and he invited me over regularly to his house to hang out. This is where I was able to befriend my current husband's mom, and God did she love to talk about him. From her, I found out what college he goes to, his past girlfriends, what his elementary and middle school was, his favorite and least favorite foods, his pet peeves, what he likes, etc. Eventually, when my visits started getting more and more frequent, I formally met my current husband again. Current husband, I'll call him E, would come over every other week and stay for either Friday through Sunday, or Saturday through Sunday. On those days specifically I would wear my cutest outfits to impress him, and also joke around with him a lot. Eventually I befriended him as well. A little background on E, he is the school record holder for a certain sport at my school, which I just so happened to do. And around halfway through my senior year E came back during the season to help coach the current high school athletes, which included me, in order to get some more volunteer work hours in, and I got to spend a lot more time with him. I loved every second of it. We were friends before, but then we became much closer since I got to spend lots of extra time with him after school, where sometimes he would even drive me home since we lived relatively close. Fast forward to when I had to move away to NYC for college, he moved with me since he coincidentally got a job near my college. I lied, it wasn't a coincidence. I found out he got a job offer and applied to a college nearby his workplace. Being each other's only friends in a new state, we became incredibly close. We started dating when I was almost in sophomore year of college, and he proposed to me after I graduated. We just got married almost a year ago. He knows absolutely nothing about how I truly know him, and believes it is fate that brought us together through his younger brother. More recently I had been debating on whether or not I should tell him, or at least his younger brother, the truth, since the only reason I befriended him was to get closer to E. I feel guilty every time he tells others our love story, because the truth is, I've known him for 10 years, while he's only known me for about 7. I decided to tell him everything this 4th of July. After the fireworks mostly ended and we were heading back, I asked him in the car, wouldn't it have been weird if we met each other before the first time we actually met? But we just didn't think of each other as significant at the time? He smiled and laughed and turned to me saying, That's impossible. There's no universe where we would have met and I would not think of you as significant. That statement struck me in the heart, because I knew I would soon prove that sentence very wrong, but I continued on with my plan anyway. What if I told you we have met each other before? Before that time I was introduced as E's little brother's friend? He looked at me like I was crazy, so that's when I pulled over on the side of the road and pulled out my phone to show him a long note explaining everything. I realized that sounds like a dumb way to tell him, but I wrote it down so I could get all my thoughts out the way I wanted. He took about 8 minutes to read the whole thing, and when he finished he put the phone down and stared straight ahead, almost like he was dumbfounded, scared, and confused all at the same time. I started throwing out every excuse and apology I could muster at the moment for about 15 minutes straight when he decided to tell me to stop, and I did. Then he just sat there and sobbed uncontrollably for about 10 minutes before he finally asked me how much of our relationship, and how much of my identity, was fabricated according to his liking. I told him the honest truth. None of my personality or identity was fabricated for him, except for the fact of how we met. The only thing I ever changed about myself to make him like me more was lying about liking Chinese food. I hate Chinese food. But other than that, everything else was real. Although my friendship with his younger brother was built upon ill intentions, my friendship between his brother and I is now one of the most genuine friendships I have now. He just cried and told me that he did not want a divorce at all, but he did want us to have some time apart so that he could absorb the truth that I gave him. He also said that he expected me to tell his brother and mom this Friday because they deserve to know the truth just as much as he did. I told him okay, and we drove the rest of the ride home in silence. When we got home he hugged me and cried for about 5 minutes before he got out the car, packed his stuff, and said that he will be staying at a nearby hotel for now. He said that he knows that he still loves me, but did not yet know how to react to the fact that the beginning of our relationship was very, very orchestrated. At that moment I thought that telling him was a success. I honestly didn't know. He sent me a good night and I love you text last night while he was at the hotel, so I guessed he was not as mad as he may be betrayed. Woke up this morning to find out that hubby not only lied about going to a hotel to stay at, but also lied about not wanting a divorce, through a text message. He went to his family's home, not a fucking hotel. Told them the entire story himself, probably exaggerated it too to make me seem crazy. His whole family wants nothing to do with me too, claiming I'm psycho. He said that he lied about going to a hotel, because he knew if he told the truth I would try to stop him. Honestly, I feel so betrayed. I tried to be a good wife by showing him the true me, and this is what he does? I did all this work just for it to end up like this? Honestly, I kind of deserve it. I didn't even tell him in the first place because I felt bad. I told him because I had a suspicion that he was catching on to the fact that I knew him for 2.5 years before he knew me, largely because I found out he was keeping my old phone in his work desk. My old phone that has screenshots of a lot of his old Instagram posts, plans in my notes app about him, etc. So I guess he never truly loved me if he can't even get past an honest confession like this one. I might update this in a few years when I find a new husband, but for now, this is where that story takes its end. Has anyone lived in the walls of your house when you didn't notice? When I was in my very early 20s, my mom and I shared a house. We had a stalker. The first night we stayed in the house, someone got into our car. My mom happened to come outside, saw him, set off the panic alarm on the car and scared him away. My backpack had been in the car and he dumped the contents into the floorboard of the car but left the paycheck that I had just cashed, all the cash still in a bank envelope. The police said it seemed that they were searching for something specific and really questioned me about what that might be. But I have no idea. Police were able to get a partial palm print off the car but had no matches in their system. My mom and I were out doing yard work and found a phone cord under our deck. It connected into the phone box on the outside of the house. We called the phone company out and they said that they figured that someone had been using the cord to hook up a phone and lay under our deck and listen in on our phone calls. They removed the cord and put a lock on the phone box. We also frequently heard someone walking outside our windows at night. We would call the police and they would drive by but not see anyone. Another time all of the light bulbs from our exterior lights were removed. Once we came home and my mom realized that a pair of earrings and a stuffed animal that had been sitting on her dresser were missing. There was no sign of anyone having broken in, but those items never turned up and we were sure someone had been in the house. We frequently heard this weird thump and squeak noise that we could never figure out what caused it. Another time my mom was raking leaves at the front of the house and saw something in one of our bushes. It was a voice-activated recorder, wrapped in black plastic and tied to the trunk of one of our bushes. The recorder was tapped into our phone line. Someone had gotten under our house, drilled a hole through our foundation and ran a phone cord through the hole, into the recorder in the bush. We have no idea how our neighbors didn't see or hear this happening. The police, who were well aware of the issues by this point, now seem to realize that this was a serious, scary problem. They sent several officers out to investigate the recorder. We were in the house talking to an officer and heard the thump and squeak noise that we always heard. We told the officer that's the noise we can't identify. As it turns out, at that moment an officer was crawling under the house and had bumped a pipe. He was able to repeat the noise. The police figured that it was almost impossible to get into or out of the crawl space under our house without bumping that pipe. And we heard that noise a lot. The police think that whoever it was getting into the crawl space and lying under the house listening to us. He had been living there for months just listening and listening, and when I found that out it really creeped me out. We put a cover over the entrance and glued it down. We put sequins in a certain order in the glue so that we could tell if it had been removed and re-glued. It was all insanely creepy. We eventually moved. I moved in with my boyfriend in a second-floor apartment. I felt so much safer with people all around and figured that the stalking issue was behind me. Not long after we moved in I noticed that our caller ID wasn't working. I called the phone company and they informed me that a Mr. Kramer had called and requested that the caller ID service be turned off on our phone. I had a meltdown. I was so upset, first off because the phone company let some random person make changes on our phone line, and secondly because apparently the issues were not behind me and they were planning something and didn't want the caller ID to show up. I put a password on our account so no changes could be made without it. And that was the last issue we ever had. I really think the caller ID issue was possibly unrelated. Maybe someone was accidentally making changes to the wrong account or something? Either way, it was very creepy, though I have to admit, if the person had wanted to do something bad to either one of us, there were surely plenty of times that could have been done. It really seems they just wanted to observe us and scare us.